Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is the third webinar in our SUMPs-Up series of the SUMP learning program for mobility practitioners. And welcome to the webinar today on measure selection for SUMP. I'm just seeing people are still coming in. Okay, but I think we can start now. I hope you can see my screen and hear me well. And we will start with a few technical tips for the webinar. I think most of you have dialed in via computer. If there is any problem sometimes with the audio, it's also possible to join by phone. But I think it should be fine. Then you are all by default muted right now. We do that to decrease the background noise and to just have a calm environment for our presenters. So everybody is muted, but there are different options how you can like make yourself heard, so to say, or ask questions. There is a button to raise your hand in case there's something very urgent. But we would, if you have any questions to any of the presentations or in general about the project or about anything we say, we would like to encourage you to use this question button or this question section that you can see here on the screenshot as well. So there you can write your questions. We will partly perhaps be able to answer them already during the webinar, and especially when there are questions to the presentations, we will then take them later in the question and answer session. But you can ask anything also if you have something, if there is something technical, or if you have questions about the project. So just write them there, and that's a better way for us to manage them, and we can make sure we answer everything. We will have several polls in this webinar where we ask you a few questions, because of course we would also like to know who is actually joining us today and what you're interested in, etc. But you will see when we come to the polls. You're just required to click on the answer, and then we can show you the result, etc. So the webinar team today, you can see here, so that you also know a bit like, yeah, who you are, who you have to do it with today. We have three presenters. My colleague Maja Rosanen, who is working together with me, and we work together in the SUMPs-Up project. Then we have Anna Dragutescu from ICLA Europe, who's the project coordinator of this project. She will have a presentation. And then we have our city case example from the Oradea metropolitan area and Mr. Ciprian Barna. Oradea city has been taking part in our first SUMP learning program for expert cities, and he will tell you about their experience, and especially about their experience with the measure selection process for SUMP. So this is what we do today. Now I even took a little bit, I was a bit fast with that. So we start with an update, or like a presentation about the different learning activities that we organize for mobility practitioners. So for you within the SUMPs-Up project, Maja will introduce those different activities. Then Anna will give an input presentation on the measure selection process for SUMP and introduce the measure selection guidelines that have been developed in our project. And then we come to the case example, and we'll give most time to the case example and the city example to hear their experiences. And as I said, whenever you have questions, especially to Ciprian's presentation, please write them down, and then we try to take them all, or as many as possible, in the question section before we wrap up and then end the webinar for today. So next, we will actually like to ask you a few things, as I just mentioned. So we'll have two polls because we would like to know who you are as well. So the first one is the question about the organization that you represent. Please answer this question so we get an overview about who you are. Mm-hmm. Coming. Okay, here you can see the results. So majority comes from municipal administration and educational institutions. That's I think the result that we mainly get. Thanks a lot. And now we go straight with another poll, because we would like to know, this is now our third webinar in the series. We would like to know, if you have participated in other SUMP or in other SUMPs-Up webinars before? Or is this your first webinar ever, even? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll share the results. And yes, great to see that 50% almost have been at least in one of webinars before. Great to have you back, and welcome to everybody who is here new. Thanks a lot. So, oh, do you see it? Sorry. I'm sorry. Now you see the poll results, right? Yeah. So here you see it. So 47% have been in the webinar before this one, and 18% even in all three so far. Great. So it's just, these are just things that are interesting for us also, and for planning our activities in the future, etc. So that's why we ask these kind of things. Yeah. Thanks a lot for the answers, and now we will continue in our in the agenda. We'll start the webinar finally. I will hand over to my colleague Maya. Second. We'll make her a presenter, and she will introduce you to the different learning activities that we're still planning. Thanks.
Okay, good morning or good day also from my side. I hope you can now see my camera and also the screen. So let's start the presentation. So I will be telling you today a bit about what kind of different learning activities we offer for mobility practitioners besides these webinars that you're attending today. But first, a bit about SUMPs-Up project. So our main aim is to really, yes?
We don't see your screen. At least I don't see your screen. Can you check?
Yes, wait. Second. Okay, sorry.
Now.
Now?
Yes, now we see the screen.
It should be.
Yes,
okay. Great. Okay. So the main objective of the Civitas SUMPs-Up project is really to set up the SUMPs as the European-wide strategic planning approach for mobility. And we focus especially on countries and cities where the take-up of the SUMP is still low and the negative effects of the transport are really serious. So during the project, we have already organized SUMP learning programs, which in the end of the project have then targeted over 100 cities. We are currently organizing SUMP Learning Program 4 and then starting soon SUMP Learning Program 5. But then besides these programs where you have to apply, we are organizing these open activities for all mobility practitioners during the project. And our aim is to reach 200 mobility practitioners during the project, like overall. And what is a mobility practitioner? We have defined that as any individual who is interested in mobility can work for a municipality in transport department or maybe in other related department like city planning, but somehow mobility is related to that person's work, or also a person who works for consultancy or city network or NGO or any kind of, so different kind of individuals who have interest in mobility team and especially in sustainable urban mobility plans. And I hope this SUMP cycle is already familiar to all of you. And it might seem like a challenge to go through this whole cycle. And there are as many different ways to set up SUMP as there are cities. Of course, it does have to fit the local context and the circumstances as well, and reflect the city's challenges, like how the SUMP will be then built up. But there are also like some common elements if you go through the whole cycle that the SUMP should include. Like you should analyze the mobility situation, identify your stakeholders and find right ways to work with them, then develop some scenarios and select smart targets and so on. And it may sound complicated because it has like different kind of steps that you need to go through. But luckily there is quite a lot of support already available for cities to implement the SUMPs. There are like different kind of guidelines and different kind of training workshops organized where cities have possibility to exchange with each other. And this is of course like one of the opportunities as well to learn from one topic. And then what do we offer in SUMPs-Up project? So we offer different kind of activities so that it's easy for everybody to participate. So like I mentioned, we have organized these SUMP learning programs. Unfortunately, the calls have been already closed, but maybe some of you already have participated in those. Then we also offer e-courses and these webinars, as well as guidance material, different kind of tools and reports as well that may help you. And I will tell a bit more about these different activities. So first of all, we offer these e-learning courses, a series of e-learning courses for different experts. And these help to go through the different phases and steps in the SUMP process. And they will start from the beginning of the cycle and then help. And then these are like very easy to participate because they are self-study courses, but with some concrete exercises as well. And they are available anytime. So you could participate also during the midnight if you would like to, in the evening time. And then there are also, we have included several case examples from cities who are already experienced with SUMPs. And then they include also tips for guidelines and further reading. So they are available in the Mobility Academy anytime. And we will, during the SUMPs-Up project, we will develop 7 e-courses. So the first 3 courses have been now launched, and they are focusing on the first stages of the SUMP cycle. So preparing for the SUMP and analyzing the mobility situation, then creating the SUMP vision in cooperation with different stakeholders, and then how to set up SUMP as a strategic plan and select the right targets for the plan, and also targets that you can then measure later on. And then soon, excuse me, we will then also in the spring launched the next 3 courses, the course 4, 5, and 6, which is also the same topic a bit than we have the webinar today. And then we have these webinars. So we have still 3 more webinars to come, and they always focus on different aspects of the SUMP and introduce useful tools and guidelines. But also we always have at least one city case example to really hear from practical experiences. And then there is possibility to ask also questions. And next webinar topic will be SUMP action plan and how to develop that, and also like how to get political commitment to the plan and the actions as well. We will launch the date in our website and Twitter account, but it will be organized in May, but please follow the channels if you would like to participate. And if you missed our previous webinars, the first one was starting the SUMP process and tools for SUMP, where we had also city case from Vilnius, Lithuania. And then the second one, data collection for SUMP, where we had city case example from Malmö, from Sweden. So those are available in SUMPs-Up website. The presentations are available, but also the recordings of the webinars are available, as we will make also the recording from this webinar available to you. And then we have national workshops, which are then targeted to really the local, or they're usually organized in local languages, so in certain countries. So we will have still 2 workshops to come in Italy, Rome, in June 2019, and then also in Spain, San Sebastian, June 5th. So also you can follow our website to learn more about these activities. Then we have already published some reports, for example, the status of SUMP in the member states. So this is available in our website, and maybe it's good to also check the status of SUMPs in your country and what kind of support mechanisms there are available. And also we have developed policy recommendations. There are also targeted recommendations to local level and local authorities. And then we have these guidelines, and you are lucky that you will hear today a bit more about these measure selection guidelines. They will be presented by Anna to you, but then we also have this action plan template, which will be then the topic of the next webinar if you're interested, but they are already available in our website. But this was a short overview of the different kind of activities. So if you would like to participate, just follow our Twitter. So that's a useful way to get more information about the activities. But thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thanks a lot for that introduction. And before we come to the next presentation, we do another quick poll, because of course we are also really interested in those of you who are working for a municipality. We would like to know what is actually the status of your SUMP. So here comes another poll to just get an impression like where you are. Do you have an SUMP at all? Are you preparing your first one, or are you at the implementation stage, or you even have more experience with SUMPs already? Okay, I think the numbers are getting stable. A couple of seconds, and then I will close the poll. Okay. So here's the result. So most of you are in the preparation phase of your first SUMP, or you don't have any SUMP yet, and around 20% you're implementing your first SUMP. Yeah, so I really recommend also those of you who are now in the preparation phase and you have not taken part in other webinars, for example, before, or to check out our e-courses that Maya presented, because there you will also find some valuable information and perhaps some support and help that you can use in that stage. And of course, those that are now implementing the SUMP, I mean, you are now, I mean, this is probably really, this webinar kind of is at the right place for you. And also there, of course, the e-courses will support still. Okay, thanks a lot. We hide this one, and I will hand over to my colleague Anna, who will give the input presentations, and I will now, Anna, make a presenter.
So good morning, everyone. I hope you hear me well, see me well, and you can also see my screen.
We see your screen, Anna, but not you.
You cannot see me?
No.
I can see Anna.
Huh? I cannot see, but okay, it's
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Esther, and thank you, Maya, for introducing our mobility practitioners learning program. And as Esther mentioned earlier, my name is Ana Drăguțescu. I work for ICLE European Secretariat, and I am the project coordinator of SUMPs-Up. Welcome, everybody, to our third webinar already for the mobility practitioners. I hope you have enjoyed the previous ones, and hopefully you will stay with us for the future webinars to come. In the presentation for today, you will hear, I hope, interesting things about how to select the measures for your sustainable urban mobility plan and how to better start with this topic by setting up the context of the measure selection. As you can see in the cycle, the measure selection is an important step that lies in the second half, in the second quadrant of the SUMP cycle. And it's an important step that helps you reach the targets of the SUMP that you go through and you develop. Practitioners need to be aware of the challenges that they can face and meet along the way in order to conduct an effective and efficient SUMP process with the aim of achieving a high-quality SUMP. So what are our learning objectives for today? The measure selection, let's see first what the measure selection is. The measure selection is a process of identifying the most suitable and cost-effective policy measures to achieve the SUMP's vision and objectives and to overcome the identified problems. So all the problems you have identified in the first quarter of the SUMP cycle, you will have to deal with them in the second quarter of the SUMP cycle, and the measure selection is one good important step that will help you achieve the objectives and deal with these problems. What do we need to know about this process is to better understand how to select, assess, and package the measures, and to be able to assess and evaluate the impact that these measures will have once they will be implemented in our cities. So let's take a first look at the topic. To understand the mobility needs and transport problems of the cities, it's a difficult task when thinking and implementing sustainable urban mobility. We need to understand how measures can meet the needs and address the problems, and to think beyond any preconceived solutions. You will hear about these preconceived thoughts and solutions that decision makers have for the cities. So again, what is a measure? A few definitions for us to better understand what we are talking about. So a measure is an action that can be implemented to contribute to reaching one or more policy objectives in the SUMP process development and to overcome one or more identified problems. We can package the measures, and a package of measures is a combination of different measures which have been grouped together in a package to better contribute and to more effectively contribute to reaching the policy objectives. And we can use the help of option generators and go through the process of option generation, because we have to somehow obtain these measures. So the process by which possible measures are identified is the process of option generation. And we have to also go through an option appraisal, the process by which a proposed measure or package is assessed in advance of its implementation. So, as I said before in the previous slide, the measure selection could be a challenge for the cities. And there are 5 principal reasons why we say that. First of all, because cities have a very wide range of measures available to them. Too easy, and sometimes it can be too easy to overlook solutions, which could be more effective. There are many stakeholders and politicians that have these preconceived ideas as to what should be done in the city. And evidence suggests that these solutions are often not the most cost-effective. So they come up with their own ideas without going through a very well-established process to understand whether these solutions are the most beneficial ones for the cities. Then the most cost-effective measures are often not the most easily implemented ones. So there are split responsibilities, there's lack of funding, the public opposition can limit what it has been done. An SUMP is likely to draw on several measures, but the performance and implementability will depend on how they are packaged. So it's always a challenge to package the measures. And a SUMP needs to be more than a wish list of measures. Prior to the implementation, each measure needs to be defined in detail, assessed in terms of its likely impact. So we have to understand what the future impact of the measure could be in order for us to decide whether we will include it or not in the long list of measures. There are different ways of creating this list of measures and going through this process of defining the measures, creating the list, rating the measures, and going to obtain approval for the list. I am going to introduce these steps for you to better understand how it's the easiest way to go through this process. So first, we have to determine the baseline to review the already implemented measures and the status of the city's current transport system, because the city doesn't start with point zero when we develop an SUMP. The city has previously implemented something else, other transport plans, other sectoral plans. So we need to understand what other measures have been implemented and how we can better connect our SUMP to what's already been implemented. We have to create the list of measures to design to address the city's vision and targets, as I said before, to rate the measures and proceed to obtaining approval for the selected measures. A few words about this baseline and determining the baseline of the city. The city has to avoid thinking about solutions before it has agreed on a vision and the objectives to reach the vision. This will help to better understand what problems the city faces. So there's a specific strategical approach and cycle that the city has to go through. So we don't have to start with listing the measures before understanding the vision and the objectives that would help reach that vision. There are different key elements that should be analyzed, as shown in the table below. You will see this table with specific modes of transport and key elements that need to be analyzed in order for us to come up with a good list of measures. This process will deepen the knowledge about the current status of the city. It will help the city to determine the capacity for measure implementation. And it should be done, as I said, systematically for each mode of transport. So the measures have to be identified, and we have to identify the best measures that will help to solve the problems listed before. A good list of measures is a good exercise for the cities. It will increase internal knowledge and awareness, capacity building with politicians and planners in the organization. So the list, creating and listing the measures doesn't have to be necessarily done by only technicians. It can involve, and it's advisable to involve a broad list of stakeholders. We have to include and choose physical measures to improve the infrastructure regarding safety, walking, cycling, public transport, but also mobility management measures that increase the efficiency of the existing transport system. There's an increasingly wide range of policy measures already available for the European cities. You can find in the manuals that Maya introduced you to a very long list of measures. Our colleagues screened the already existing measures from different projects, from different transport programs, and you can find this list of measures in the annex of the SUMPs-Up manuals, but you can also use other sources for you to understand what measures can be included in the long list of measures for your SUMP. I advise you to use a good option generator because this process is crucial to find the interventions that offer the highest return, as I said before. The full range of options should look across all modes, so don't forget any modes of transport. What you see in this slide and also in this slide, and I will detail you about this, I will give you more details. It's the consult measure option generator. So consult was designed to help policymakers, professionals, and interest groups to understand the challenges of achieving sustainability in urban transport, and it can support the cities to identify appropriate policy measures and packages, and it provides detailed information on individual policy measures. You have the website, the URL for reaching consult in the bottom of the slide. Just a few more words. So, as you can see, you have a measure option generator specific page, but you also have a decision makers guidebook and a policy guidebook. So you can find specific measures that you can include in your SUMP on this website, and you can also find descriptions for each of the measures and how they can be implemented, how can they be assessed, and how you can find evidence of their performance once implemented. Another very good tool that I recommend is the Urban Transport Roadmap, developed within another very useful project. It's an online tool, as also Consult is, and it can help you develop the first scenarios of your SUMP and also list the measures that you want to include in the SUMP. So it can explore and identify appropriate sustainable transport measures, quantify the transport, environmental and economic impact of these measures, as I said, to understand the future impact, and it can consider an implementation pathway for this policy scenario. Again, you have the URL to reach this website in the bottom of the slide. And so just a few more words about this website to understand how it works. You will fill in the information about your city. You will be asked a couple of questions about how your city looks like, and about modal share, and about all sorts of transport information about your city. And then you'll receive also information and answers from this tool. You'll see, as I try to design something for a German city in the bottom part of the slide, you'll see your modal share, how it looks like. You will see, and you'll receive all sorts of information that I mentioned earlier. Just to move on with the measure generators, you can also use Max Explorer or Evidence or Civitas. So as I said earlier, you have a lot of opportunities and possibilities to find measures within the project. Max Explorer is an interactive tool to help mobility management beginners in choosing the mobility management measures. Then you have evidence that contains a set of 22 mobility measures, reviews and training materials for the academics and trainers. And then you can use the Civitas website that also provides measures within the Civitas policy fields. Just to move on with our presentation, sometimes the SUMP measures can be rejected. It's very common that these things can happen. So then the SUMP becomes less effective. There are various types of barriers and various types of reasons for this to happen. There are governance barriers, so there's a lack of autonomy from the national government, so there are inconsistent policies across government boundaries or a mismatch of public and private sector objectives. There are financial barriers, particularly related to public transport issues, because there's a reluctance to increase the fees. Some of the measures would require the increase of fees for public transport operators. There are legal barriers because the legal powers to implement a particular measure might not exist. The legal responsibilities there could be split between agencies and regulations that require involvement of the private sector. There's obviously the political acceptability, which is always an issue that we have to face with. Politicians fear of lack of public acceptance, so sometimes they just reject the measure from the start because this could become less, because they could become less popular because by implementing that measure, or technical barriers, just the simple lack of skills and expertise could be a very important barrier. Once you have selected the long list of measures, now you have the list, and you have to make it short, because you cannot implement all the measures listed there, and you also cannot implement them all in the same period of time. So you have to rate the measures to identify the ones that are effective and feasible for the city in the future. You have to consider aspects like whether the measure can be implemented, if it contributes to a more sustainable city, and if it is feasible. You can see in the left side of the slide, again, I used the measure option generator from Consult. This generator can help you rank the measures and also to rank them compared to other measures. So by bringing in other measures that support the initial measure, in order for you to be able to create packages of measures. My advice for you is to use diagrams, so they are easier to be presented to politicians and citizens when you rate the effectiveness and feasibility of a measure. When the rating is completed, a summary of the highest rated measures or most prioritized list can be brought on when proceeding with the SUMP planning process. And the list of measures is finalized. Congratulations, you have a very nice list of measures now included in your SUMP. You have to gain approval for it, so you have to come forward and present it to the citizens and to the politicians, even though the politicians have already been involved in the process, and also hopefully the citizens, but the final list should be brought to the public knowledge. As you see in my slide, this very colorful scheme has been developed by the city of Vienna when developing their SUMP, and it's an image, a drawing incorporating the main messages that the Citizens Council have had for their urban mobility plan. So it's really very important to agree with the citizens that these are the measures and the best things to implement for their cities. One step forward, now you have the short list of measures and you have to think how it's better for them to be implemented. And in order to create synergies that can achieve more together, so once you implement these measures to have the highest effect and the highest impact for the cities, then it's better if you create packages of measures. So a measure on its own is not sufficient to be implemented because it doesn't reach the impact that you foresee in the first place. So the advice is to create these packages of measures of 2 or more measures together, and they create the impact is bigger than the individual effects, and they can facilitate the other measures. So one measure, by implementing one measure together with another one, it can also facilitate the implementation of the initially foreseen measure. Just a couple of short examples for you to understand about, again, from Vienna. So Vienna has listed a few, as you see in the right part, fields of actions for mobility, and they have 6 very important objectives, and the fields of actions connected to these objectives, and then the list of measures listed on the left side. You can see how each package of measures will reach the specific objectives and fields of action they have listed in the previous part of the SUMP. So it's very important how you connect and how you list and how you connect to the objectives and your targets already defined in the SUMP. A few other examples, OECD has also described 6 different packages of management measures that can be used as inspiration. I will not read them through because I'm already behind the schedule with my presentation, but you can find them in the manuals, and you can consider them a source of inspiration for listing the measures and also packaging them. A few references. So you have heard from Maya about our SUMPs-Up manuals. They have been designed for 3 types of cities. So for beginner cities, the START manual, for the intermediate cities, the Step Up manual, and for advanced cities, the Innovate manual. You can also find the standards for developing the SUMP action plan also online. But I invite you to join our next webinar because I will talk about the development of this SUMP action plan. But you can also find online previously developed guidance within previous projects, like the SUMP guidelines. I'm sure you are very aware of them, the PolySUMP methodology, and the measure selection manual developed within the challenge project. I hope you have enjoyed my presentations. In case you have any questions, I will probably hear them later. So thank you very much, and I hand it on to Esther.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot for a very comprehensive presentation. And just one more time to everybody, you will all receive also all the presentations afterwards with all the links, etc. So you don't have to write them down right now, so you will get all the material. Yes, thank you, Anna. And I think we will now directly, like after we have now heard a lot of like background and let's say a bit more theoretical background, how things should be or how you should conduct it, we will now hand over to our city case, and I will make Mr. Cyprian Barna from the metropolitan area of Oradea as a presenter, and he will introduce you of how Oradea has worked in practice with selecting measures for their SUMP.
Good morning, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes, hear well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to join the webinar, the third webinar. I will try to present you the most important development thesis regarding the development of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan at the level of the city of Oradea by focusing on the measure selection process. In order to have a brief introduction, I will start to present you a little bit let's say, the territorial impact of the in order to have an overview. It is situated, the city of Oradea is situated at the border with Hungary, at about 600 kilometers from Bucharest and 250 from Budapest and approximately 500 from Vienna. It is the 10th largest city from Romania, with a total area of 116 square kilometers. The total number of inhabitants is 222,000 100,000 inhabitants. Number of households 91,000. Number of inhabitants per square kilometer 1,900, and the total length of streets approximately 430 kilometers. This means the total road transport infrastructure amounts 900 streets. We are talking also about the functional urban area. We are talking about the Oradea metropolitan area, which is the first organized metropolitan area from Romania. It was founded in 2005 and encompasses the city of Oradea and another 11 surrounding municipalities working around the Global Development Territorial Project. We are talking about the territorial influence at the level of the whole county, of the level of Bihor County, which encompasses 600,000 inhabitants. But this influence, territorial influence, of course, has also an impact at the cross-border level, encompassing in the catchment area of the city of Oradea also 10 other municipalities from the Hungarian side border. We also have public transport services in the one municipality situated on the other side of the border. Regarding the role of...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you make a full screen of your presentation, please?
Yes, I will try. Yeah. No, it's okay.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding the role of the city at the level of the whole, let's say, county, I just want to present you a little bit, let's say, the importance of this role. For example, more than 42% out of the total population from Bihor County live in the first area of influence of the city of Oradea. We have defined 3 catchment areas, which are, let's say, defined in terms of travel time by car from the city of Oradea. And regarding, for example, the number of employees, 62% of the total number of employees from Bihor County work in the city of Oradea. The same thing, 72% out of the total number of employees from Bihor County are concentrated in the first area of influence of the city of Oradea. This means about 50 to 20 minutes travel time by car from the city. The same thing that emphasizes the role of the city in the regional development is the GDP, for example, production. We have more than 65% of the total GDP from Bihor County generated at the level of the city of Oradea. The same thing, the most part of flows, for example, from Bihor County on both directions are concentrated in the Oradea metropolitan area. We have more than 5 million of passengers that transit the border between Oradea and between Romania and Hungary. Regarding the traffic flows on the public transport network, on the relation between the city of Oradea and the surroundings, the level of municipality from the whole country, we have more than 400 bus travels per day, the relation between the city and the other localities. Let's talk about a little bit about the national mobility context in order also to give you a better perception of the tools that we have disposed in order to develop, let's say, a shift or transition toward an SUMP approach. We are talking about the lack of current network of motorways in correlation with territorial development. More than half of the registered cars, unfortunately for Romania in 2007, have more than 15 years, according to the Romanian Health Observatory report. The average network of cycle paths in major cities represents approximately 22 kilometers. And regarding the urban public transport, we have over 40 cities with a population between 60,000 and 2 million inhabitants that dispose of organized urban public transport services. You have also some details. I won't read it because you can see it very easy. Descending a little bit at the level of the local mobility context, we have had the opportunity to elaborate the first sustainable mobility plan from Romania, and we have started in 2013. At that time, we did not have any specific provisions regarding the elaboration of the sustainable urban mobility plans. So in this context, we have used the EU SUMP guidelines existing at that time that are in course of being updated. The main context regarding the mobility was related to the lack of an integrated spatial planning policy. The focus on authorizing procedures and less on integration and correlation with other sectorial policies. Lack of an urban mobility dedicated policy, except the feasibility studies for implementing of various investments in the road infrastructure. The main facilities, hospitals, markets, hypermarkets were distributed from a spatial point of view, the level of the city. In terms of metropolitan development, more than 70,000 inhabitants from the city moved in the functional urban area. Therefore, with the other surrounding areas having a commuting rate which amount approximately 25,000 persons per day, out of which only 8,000 persons travel by public transport. Investment in transport system were more focused on the supply side measures. This means the development of new roads, modernizing the existing road infrastructure, increasing the road capacity, creating of more parking places. This was the context before the SUMP in 2013, when the primary objective was to increase flow capacity, to find alternative for cars and increase the speed. We had experienced an important increase of motorized transport from 71,000 cars in 2008 to 96,000 cars in 2015, and today we have more than 108,000 cars registered at the level of the city. Of course, there was also a lack of territorial planning. The urban sprawl moved some linking points toward new economic activities without modeling the public transport system on this new, let's say, territorial reality. On few main corridors, of course, the tramway shares the road space with the cars, generating at each change supplementary problems in terms of organizing the circulation, and this causes also traffic jams. Lack of dedicated lane for buses, the lack of an integrated metropolitan public transport system. At the level of the public transport system, we had 5 tramway lines and 19 bus lines, with a total number of travelers per day estimated at 174,000. and out of which 127,000 were done by tramway, and 46,000 travels per day by bus. Linking to the SUMP cycle and the starting of the transition toward an SUMP approach, we have developed the overall phases, starting from preparation, goal setting, elaboration, and we are now in phase of in the current phase of monitoring. In 2013, the SUMP was assumed. The SUMP process was split into two parts. At the beginning, the SUMP was assumed by Oradea Local Transport Company through an EU-funded project. Due to the lack of financing at national level, only EU funds perspective and all local budgets were taken into account. This means the regional operational program. In order to cooperate, to coordinate the overall development process, of course, it was set up a working group, which was composed of various key important actors from the City Hall of Oradea and the other company owned by the city. We did not have a self-assessment regarding the status of various SUMP elements, except for the public transport, while the timeline was split into two phases, together with the related objectives and measures, 2023 and 2030. We have identified the key actors and stakeholders, so representatives from various departments, from the City Hall, County Council, Public Transport Company, Environment Agency, Public Health Direction, County Police Department, universities, SMEs, NGOs. The development process was the responsibility of Oradea Local Transport Company, as I previously mentioned. But after the modification of the law on urbanism in 2016 and 2015, this strategic document, the SUMP, was also assumed by the city of Oradea. In spite of involving a diverse array of relevant stakeholders, the participation level unfortunately was limited and comprised in most cases the entities under the control of the municipality. In terms of content, as I previously mentioned, it rather concentrated on traffic management and public transport. But we try also to force the correlation with the general urban plan and the development strategy. Of course, we experience this continuous lack of integration between the land use planning policy and the transport, both in terms of content and institutional structure. Regarding the second element of the first phase of the preparing well phase, when we talk about stakeholders and citizen involvement, we had applied various tools, of course, in order to ensure large visibility of this process. We developed newsletters, questionnaires, leaflets for drivers, students, participation in various TV broadcasts. We organized various mobility forums and also public consultations. Regarding the agreement on the work plan and management arrangements, it was set up the working group that I previously indicated, which was in charge of ensuring the defining of the work plan for the planning process and for monitoring progress. When it came to discuss about the element 3 of this first phase of the SUMP cycle, analyzing the mobility situation and development of scenario, the importance of the current analysis applied to the overall transportation modes was a very important stage, as it enabled us to have, let's say, a clear and real picture regarding the various problems that we have at the level of the city. In these respects, you can see that we have applied various tools, so traffic census in 50 places from the city of Oradea for the duration of 1 week between 7 to 20 o'clock. Origin destination surveys on the 7 main entries, 5 on the national roads and 2 on county level roads. The census of passenger on public transport network for all the lines on the overall operation duration service for 1 week. Origin destination surveys applied to main institutions, companies, schools. We had distributed more than 2,700 questionnaires, and we have received back more than 1,300 questionnaires. And when it comes to discuss also about transport modeling, we have used a Visum software, a special software dedicated to multimodal transport modeling. Discussing about the distribution of travels according to their scope, I can tell you that the third most important position were occupied by going to work, then shopping and education, so for the students and for the school. Regarding the distribution of travels over the day, the peak hours were at 8 o'clock and 16 o'clock. Regarding the model split that resulted further the elaboration of our SUMP analysis, we have the following results. So the model split for cars was set up at 39%, public transport 35%, 25% for walking, and 1% for cycling. Regarding the second phase of the SUMP cycle development, so the rational and transparent goal setting, so the vision was identified as being the need to set up an effective, integrated, sustainable, and safe urban transport system that would promote the economic, social, and territorial development in the city of Oradea and its catchment area. The SUMP specific objectives were 5 and were focused on the accessibility, safety, environment, economic effectiveness, of urban public spaces. We also informed the public by organizing a final public consultation. And regarding the targets, identification, the priority and developing of smart targets, we have defined a lot of targets, such as the increase of the occupancy rate of public transport vehicles with 8% until 2025, extending the public transport network toward the metropolitan area, ensuring the affordability for traveling in the public transport system, extension of the non-motorized transport modes, increasing the attractiveness of the public transport, involvement of the improvement of the pedestrian network, revitalization of public space in decay, reducing the GHG emissions and noise levels generated by the transport sector until 2013 with 25%, and so on. In terms of sustainable urban mobility operational objectives, we have set up 9 objectives that further on we focused on in order to develop various measure packages. So the first one is related to the reducing of the traffic congestion, reducing the need for traveling, developing the sustainable transportation modes, walking and cycling, of course, reducing the negative effects of motorized traffic on the environment through traffic management, improving the discipline in the field of construction planning and correlation among public investment projects, innovating in the field of parking management, improving the road safety, improving the road transport infrastructure, and developing the local public transport system. Network, fleet, timetables, public transport stations, extension of the public transport in the metropolitan area. In terms of development scenario, we have explored 4 scenarios. The first one was related to the short term, to do nothing until 2017. Scenario 2 as until present, medium term 2020. Scenario 3, minimalist policy, medium term, and the fourth scenario, which was related to a committed policy on the long term, and which was the scenario that was chosen finally at the level of our sustainable urban mobility plan. Regarding the element 6, developing of effective packages of measures, we have also focused on determining the intervention scales on neighborhoods, on urban and suburban level. The initial package of measures was related to 98 measures, but we also were focused on identifying the best practices, the level of the cities that already implemented the respective measures. The distribution of measures was done in accordance with the scenarios. We have used the Consult program, which was developed by the Institute for Transport Studies from the University of Leeds. And we had 76 expanded set of measures. And after applying the cost-benefit analysis and the multi-criteria analysis, we had a final package of measures, so 19 measures representing 37 projects, for a total estimated budget of 132 million euros until 2013. Regarding the summary of the main proposed measures, we have focused on education and awareness in schools, developing of an integrated cycle paths networks, developing of a bike sharing system, developing of cycle parking, regular analysis and decisions regarding the roads on which speed can be increased or reduced, introducing of a congestion tax for the cars entering in the city center, developing of pedestrian areas in the city center and neighborhoods, procuring of new public transport vehicles, tramway and electric buses, expansion of the tramway line in the southern part of the city, rehabilitating the road transport infrastructure, improving the road connectivity on the relation between the city and the surroundings, correlating the investments in all the transportation modes for each new important real estate development, building of new parking facilities, setting up of 16 electric charging stations for electric vehicles, developing of a network of trolley buses, building of an intermodal terminal at the level of the main railway station, developing of busway lanes, setting up of a traffic management center. So this was, let's say, the most important measures that were listed in this initial phase. Regarding the assigning of responsibilities and resource, we have identified the regional operational program as being the most important financing source in our case, because it has a priority axis dedicated to the sustainable urban mobility development through an investment priority number 4.8, sustainable urban mobility, which enabled the local authorities to better integrate the overall transportation modes in the urban intervention areas. We have an allocation of more than 1.2 billion euros for Romania for the period, for the 2014-2020 period. We have defined, of course, the role in projects coordination, internal departments for the City Hall, Oradea Local Transport Company, Oradea Metropolitan Area, Transregio Transport Authority, and we started to elaborate the feasibility study via the external expertise. And of course, we develop the application forms and we submit the projects. In terms of arrangement for monitoring and evaluation, you have here some indicators that we set up in order to evaluate, to monitor and evaluate, let's say, the implementation of the above mentioned projects. As I previously mentioned, in 2013 we started the elaboration of the SUMP, but in 2016 the Romanian law on territorial planning was updated with the urban mobility plan concept. The urban mobility plan became mandatory, and it was defined as a complementary strategy of territorial development documentation, which is complementary to the general urban plan. It is a strategic planning tool through which it is correlated the spatial development of the localities with the mobility and transport needs of persons and goods. It addresses all forms of mobility and transport, including public and private transport, freight and passengers, motorized and non-motorized, moving or stationary. It was also set up from the national level content, a structure for the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. And as I previously mentioned, so the regional operational program was in fact the main financing instrument. This instrument was very important because we experienced rebalancing of the transportation modes inside our developed projects. If, for example, at the beginning we had projects that were focused more on cars, little by little, due to this program and the conditionalities that were promoted at the level of the regional operational program, we started to have more local-based projects that improve the integration of interventions. But even in case of, for example, of projects that are not focused on the local-based approach, we had a better integration in terms of transportation modes. And I just wanted to give you the example of an integrated project, which is in course of being prepared at the level of the city of Oradea in order to obtain EU funds through the regional operational program. And I would like just to present you some measures that were selected. We had 19 measures representing 37 projects in the frame of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. Here you have the example of the pedestrianization of a central area, which is the main area, pedestrian area from the city, Unirii Square, which was pedestrianized in 2015 and 2016. You have some images regarding the investments that were taken. These pictures were taken previously and after. Another important project was related to the extension of the tramway line in the southern area of the city, 16 million euros funded by the European Union Regional Operational Program. The same, the modernizing of the tramway fleet. We will procure 20 new tramways for the public transport service at the level of the city of Oradea. And also the reorganizing of the mobility on various important boulevards and axes at the level of the city of Oradea. For example, you have here the example representing the south to north axis, which is going to be reorganized by, of course, promoting the sustainable urban transportation modes. Also, we have had also measures that do not, let's say, encompasses direct financing of or funds, are more related to the management. So we introduced of express bus lines in order to decrease to reduce the travel time for the citizens, especially on the link between the city and the industrial parks. Another measure is related to the pedestrianization of the Ferdinand Square. You have some images, randomized images. It is a project in course of being contracted in the frame of the regional operational program. The same thing regarding the pedestrianization of another street which is situated in the historical city center of Oradea, financed in the frame of the regional operational program. The pedestrianization of the left side bank of Crișu Repede River. The same thing with another important area near the Crișu Repede bank river. Another measure or project was related to the pedestrianization of Vasile Alexandrii Street. You have some images that were taken before and after. But also we focused on the developing of pedestrian areas in the most densified neighborhoods of the city. We have 3 projects, investment projects, that are in course of being evaluated in the frame of the regional operational program, which relate to the most densified area at the level of the city, but also other complex projects regarding to the development of a complex network of underways in order to reduce the passage time for the cars, and also the prioritizing of the public transport. This is a complex project that previously was focused on car traffic management, but little by little integrated the element of public transport. Another project was related to the extension of the public transport, but also the related infrastructure in the historical city center. Other important measure, the building of 5 parking facilities in the city center, approximately 1,500 parking places. This kind of project is financed by the own budget, so the integration of the integration was not a condition. This is why this kind of projects or measures which are financed by the budget are not fully integrated, let's say, in the SUMP principles. The same thing, underground passage on an important boulevard, enlarging the bridge in order to ensure another lane for cars traffic. It is a project financed through the own budget. The building of an internal ring road in an important, in order to link some suburbs of the city to the main road transport network of the city. Regarding the EU and national SUMP guidelines, I consider that the EU and the national guidelines had a positive effect because it affected the policy framework. Of course, it ensured the funding. It facilitated the exchange of experience and best practices among various cities across various projects that were implemented by the cities, and also awareness raising was an important issue. Of course, these guidelines enable the decision makers to better understand the importance of organizing the mobility in the city. But when SUMP became mandatory and EU funds were available, it enabled them to better integrate it in the urban development. Nevertheless, of course, SUMP should become more than a mandatory document for accessing of EU funds. It is a very important condition. And of course, from the EU level, support should continue through the cohesion policy for the city in order to help them to transition toward a real SUMP approach. The EU level should be further involved in the preparation and evaluation phases of SUMPs. Cities maybe with more than 500,000 inhabitants, of course, particularly when EU funds are requested. Identified best practices should be further explored from a technical, economical, social, environment impact point of view, and promoted at the level of all cities. And of course, the need to define a set of indicators at European level in order to have, let's say, a common evaluation grid of the SUMP in the European cities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cyprian, for a very comprehensive presentation, and thanks also for including all these pictures. I think it's always very descriptive to see, like on pictures, like how the city structure and cityscape has changed. Yes, thanks. So even if it was quite a long presentation now, I think it was really good to get all this content and to get all the input. And there are like a few questions that perhaps we can try to answer them well quickly, but still so that they are needed. So one question that came up in the beginning also, when you mentioned that you have a lot of people commuting to Oradea, did you, and if you did, how did you include or work together with other municipalities around?
Yeah, it was not a very easy task, but fortunately, as we had the functional urban area which is organized around the Oradea metropolitan area, so we managed to have a common development strategy. So it was easier to approach the organizing of the transportation and the connectivity between the city and the surroundings. In terms of public transport, because this is the most, let's say, successful story at our level, it was not very easy. We have succeeded to expand the public transport service only to 2 municipalities. So it is an ongoing process. It's not easy, but due to our experience of working at the grassroots level with the local authorities, so we manage, let's say, to better integrate them in a joint planning process. But it's not easy. It's a day-by-day discussion, also trainings, capacity building for the local authorities.
Yeah.
In order to understand the importance.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, I think even if it's not easy, it's always good to have it in mind and to work for it. So that still sounds like you're on a good way.
It is also a question of better explain them the difference between the 2 public transport organizing. For example, we have a Metropolitan Transport Authority, but we have also a transport organizer at the level of the county. We are talking about 2 different systems of organizing and financing the public transport system. For example, in our case, the local authorities are totally responsible with the organizing and the financing, while in the case of the county transport organizer, it is a commercial-based public transport service where the local authorities are not at all involved. So even in the development of the timetables, they are only consulted, but they cannot intervene in terms of influencing the timetables because they are not organizers. They are outside of the decision-making process. This is why, for us, it was very important to give them the appropriate tools in order to be able to intervene in the timetables, in the development of the new public transport routes, so to be totally responsible for organizing the public transport. And we can say that the expansion of the public transport system in the most 2 important municipalities outside the city of Oradea was a successful story.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Now there came some questions still also up from the audience. I would like to take those at least still in the last few minutes. So one question is about how to present the need of intervention on urban infrastructure that aims to improve it for private transportation mode as a measure within an SUMP. let's say, through saying it is to reduce the time people spend on traffic, and it implies reduction in emissions of CO2 once we avoid traffic jams. Well, let's try to rephrase this. So yeah, like how did you succeed to present the need of these interventions on the urban infrastructure? And I think it also goes a little bit in this direction, like, yeah, like how did you, apart from that SUMP is now is like compulsory in Romania, but like how did you get the politician and decision maker to understand this need?
Yes, it was a very difficult task for us as, let's say, planners or practitioners in the development of SUMPs. Fortunately, it is mandatory because it obliged the local decision makers, let's say, to deal with the approaching of the overall transportation modes and to try to connect it to the general urban planning. It was very, very, very important. But even today, we cannot say, for example, in terms of monitoring, that we ensure the necessary capacity in order to, let's say, to control totally the monitoring process. Unfortunately, it was a mandatory step, and then, okay, we obtained the project, but now we should better focus on building the institutional capacity for monitoring and for the next planning phase. So 1 or 2 years, because of course we are dependent on the EU financing. From the national level, except the content and the let's say the requirements, we did not have any support in terms of financing urban mobility measures. So this is why it is up to the local authorities to develop this dynamic, in fact. But it's not easy. So as the cities or the political decision makers obtain the financing and the investment projects are set up, we have to follow up and we have to continue our approach. This is why I made a parallel between the projects that were financed in the frame of the regional operational program and the projects that were not at all were financed through their own public budget. For example, where you in the frame of EU funds projects, you had a lot of measures were integrated, were focused on sustainable urban transport modes because it was a requirement. But in case of own local public investment projects, maybe you saw that we had parking places in the city center, so more the supply side measures, which let's say did not create a balanced approach, in fact. So we have two kinds of approaches. One which is stimulated by the EU SUMP guidelines, national, and also the financing, which are, let's say, very clear, focusing on the overall transportation modes, planning, trying to integrate and have a local-based approach, of course. But you have the other kind of projects which are promoted through the own budget. And in this respect, at the level of this kind of measures, we do not have such much control. And it can unbalance the transition toward an SUMP approach at the level of a city. Because we do not apply the same measures.
And what you said, I think it's in those countries where the SUMP has been made mandatory, it's now also, it will show then after a few years, like about the implementation, like if it has been anchored actually, and if it has been institutionalized and understood in a way that it goes beyond that it's only mandatory.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks. There's one, I will take this one last question from the audience still. I'm now not sure if you can actually answer it, but I'll read it. There was the question about the World Bank has developed a survey for Romanian cities called The Priorities of Your City. This will end next week. How was the response for Oradea, and what are the priorities that inhabitants of Oradea are choosing? I'm not sure if you are aware of that.
Yes.
Okay.
It was an activity that was developed by the World Bank and also the Federation of Metropolitan Areas from Romania and urban agglomerations regarding the prioritizing of various measures, but the level of the most important urban areas from Romania. In Oradea was the fifth cities in terms of respondents. So the level of Romania, of course, it were the most important projects were related to the major infrastructure, such as the motorway, for example, the connection to the motorway, crossing the border. We had also the electrification of the railway line between Oradea and Cluj-Napoca in order to create a railway network, speed network, the best in Cluj-Napoca, and so on. So major investment projects, but that are, of course, very, very important and that can change, let's say, and accelerate the development, but which are less under the influence of the local authority, because we are talking about very important budgets. Whilst in the case of SUMP, we are talking more about, let's say, about a concept and also the translation into practice on a daily basis of the overall transportation modes that can be totally or the partly major part influenced by the local authorities. While in the case of the World Bank projects, we are talking more about, let's say, national intervention projects.
Bigger scale, yeah. Okay, thanks. I hope that this question was answered enough for Luana. Okay, but I think now we already are a few minutes over and I would like to not extend it too much. I hope, Cyprian, that we can share your contact details also with I think they're also in the presentation. So in case there is something urgent to ask, I hope it's okay if you can contact me.
Yeah, I'm available. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you our experience. And
yes, thanks a lot.
In case there will be other further questions, I am available to answer anytime.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we'll come just to a wrap up of this webinar. Just summing up the next activities that are coming. As Maya already mentioned in her presentation, I just want to repeat it one more time. There are already those 3 e-courses available at the Mobility Academy. So you can see the link here, mobility-academy.eu, and there are more e-courses coming up during spring. The webinar recordings from the previous webinars and also from this webinar will be available at the SUMPs-Up website. Very soon you will also receive an email still with the materials and the recordings and a very short evaluation survey now after the webinar. And the next webinar will take place in May. We will communicate the date as soon as we have settled it with the speakers. And please check check the website and check the social media that we use to stay updated, and we'll make a promotion in time, of course. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's webinar and that you can take something with you from what you have heard, and we really hope to hear you or to have you again in the next webinar. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.